This video is brought to you in part by Squarespace. Yeah, you're probably pretty familiar with that name by now on this channel, and that's no surprise. I love working with these guys, and I love their program. Long and short of it, if you're trying to get yourself a website online, Squarespace are the people you want to work with. I've personally always been intimidated at the idea of even starting a website, but these guys got me up and going within half an hour. I spend more time on character creators in video games. It takes you just a handful of minutes to get the basics, and they walk you through everything, no matter how intricate you want to get. They have a ton of preset designs that you can just get up and going at your heart's content, and it all looks super professional. And for those of you who want to get a little bit more bold and creative, you can go behind the curtains and tweak every little thing to your heart's content. If you're trying to put together a shop, portfolio, or whatever, they have tools that can track your growth, help you build an ad campaign, integrate with other social media platforms, and again, all of that is streamlined and easy to understand. It takes very little effort to get something clean and professional up in front of the world. Having your own domain name looks super sexy on a business card. And to make it even easier, if you head over to squarespace.com/gameapologist, you'll get 10% off your first purchase. Seriously, you could get this done in the time it takes you to watch this video. Thank you again to Squarespace for helping out, and on with the show. If there is any character in the Sonic franchise that's long overdue for a robot double, it's gotta be Tails, right? The little fox showed up only a year after the series itself showed up, and even when Knuckles got himself a robo-double, Tails only got a raggedy doll. One I do love with all of my heart, we just got done talking about it after all. But as Tails himself had complained about in two separate comic continuities, it felt a little weird that the mechanic/genius didn't have any robo representation. I mean, he is, after all, a mechanic. He's the smartest among Sonic's crew. But only now that's finally changed with Sonic Superstars, which, like it had done with all the playable characters, gave us the opportunity to finally set our eyes on a metal Tails. Now, like any other metal introduced in this game, currently there's not a lot to talk about, and I'm not going to repeat the same crap every single video. Metal Tails does all the same stuff in the Cyberstation boss fight and the battle mode, which unfortunately doesn't give us much to work off of in terms of individual abilities and feats. But since he was designed by Metal Sonic's original creator, we can figure out a few things based simply on its design. And its very existence made me think a little bit deeper about the overall Sonic continuity. But before I get into any of that, we have to pad out this video with some kind of content, so I thought it would be fun to look at the other times we got Tails robots in the past. And just like Amy, there are way more than I originally anticipated. Yes, I will talk about the comics and cartoons, but outside of the normal places to rummage around for robots, let's first look at the main game canon, because yes, there is something to talk about outside of the famous Tails doll. Kinda, sorta, not really in one particular instance, but we're gonna talk about it. The first time we ever got a robot resembling the two-tailed fox would be one made by Tails himself in his very own video game, Tails Adventure for the Game Gear. This is the remote robot used as a part of the player's arsenal to get into tighter places you can't otherwise reach. Now, it's fair to point out that this little bot does not function on its own. Tails commands its actions via remote control, just as the name implies, but also as the name implies, it is still a little robot, and it does look like Tails, even though it has kind of a cursed chicken leg sort of thing going on here. Even has a built-in little helicopter to help it fly around like Tails. So yeah, it counts. And we even see a larger one being built by the Fox during the credits at the end of the game. Well, attempt to build it anyway. Those damn flickies have turned on our little man. Taking away the super form was enough for you, was it, Sega? You had to turn the birds on the poor boy. The remote robot would be used as inspiration for the T-Pup robot in the Archie series, also built by Tails. And yes, we will be hopping in and out of the Archie series quite a bit in this video. But yeah, as the name T-Pup implies, this acts like a dog, which, now that I think about it, is a little weird. I mean, look, I always thought it was kind of odd whenever cartoon animal characters had animal pets. I know Disney got that started with the whole Pluto Goofy thing going on, and Sonic kind of followed suit. I mean, he had a dog in the Western canon, which already is a little weird and only made weirder when they rebooted the Archie universe and made his dog Mutsky anthropomorphic. So does that mean all dogs in this world are anthropomorphic? Because T-Pup was in the reboot rebooted universe and it remained acting like a dog, so what's going on there? And even if you can justify all of that nonsense, this is still just a strange idea. Imagine if your friend or family member or whoever just had a little robotic version of themselves and they made it act like a dog. Would you just keep a little dog version of yourself around? Imagine yourself on all fours, just stomping around, pooping in the yard, barking? You'd raise some questions, right? That's kind of strange. It's got to be a kink thing. It's totally a kink thing. Anyway, the only other time the mainline games really dabbled with the Robo-Tales was with Robo-Tales. In Sonic Lost World's thrilling narrative, the two-tailed fox ends up cubnapped by Eggman, who threatens to turn him into a robot. And in the process, he just traps the fox to a table and then leaves the room, where Tails then sabotages the machine and then dresses up in random robot parts so he can pretend that he's serving Eggman, all in a cutscene, so you can't even get a boss fight out of this. And yeah, okay, technically this isn't even a robot. Eggy, when have any of your creations ended up looking like this? He's barely robot at all. I mean, maybe in the ears he's got a Mega Buster, and I mean, one of his shoes turned into a robot. Just one shoe. This is a mess. You look like a robo-hobo, Tails. Yes, this is awful, like so many other things in Sonic Lost World, and like many of the other plot points in that game, it's random as hell without explanation or consequence. But this is interesting in the sense that it calls back to more interesting moments in Sonic history, and probably unintentionally. See, this is, as far as I can recall, the closest the mainline game series ever dabbled with robotization, unless you're counting the bonus levels in Sonic Spinball. If you don't know, that means you change an organic creature into a robot. Simple as that. This was a big scary deal for Sonic SatAM and a lot of early Archie, and it's a concept weirdly never explored in the games, just quickly referenced in LEGO Dimensions. Now, over in Europe, they kinda dabbled with this idea in their comic. They sometimes mixed it in with a concept of a badnik, as we talked about in Amy's robot video, but this is also another thing that Lost World references, and again, probably unintentionally. As really early on in Sonic the Comic, I mean like issue 2, we got a cyborged up Tails known as RoboFox. This is actually how the comic first introduced the fox into the continuity. And compared to Robo-Tales from Lost World, this design is a little more streamlined, chromed up as opposed to the random bits of nonsense, but can't say I know what's going on with this weird horn. That was certainly a choice, but this time they actually turned Tails evil. So, good job Fleetway, you did it first and you used the idea of an evil Tails far more effectively than the game that came out decades later. But as you can see from these two designs, this really doesn't count as a metal Tails. It's just a Tails with some Borg accessories. We might as well count Scrapnik Island in that bunch. Tails is decked out in the same amount of firepower after all. We don't even really get to see a Badnik Tails in action. We do get to see the shell of one in that same issue we talked about Badnik Sonic, ready to take Tails into its welcoming full bosom. But again, never gets any use. But the UK wasn't done here, as we did get a proper roboticized Tails in my absolute favorite way to take in Sonic media, the Adventure Book series. In the 4th volume, the Zone Zapper, the titular device actually transforms Tails into the Tailsnik, with the classic bolted iron design and everything. So yes, looks a lot like Sonic, except this time Tails is an actual robot and not a clone that doesn't match the art of the book. Go watch my Sonic video if you want more information. That thing was a complete nightmare to get through. All that aside, of course, Archie had their own versions of a roboticized Tails. We have this super generic one where Sonic and Tails were randomly transformed into robots in an arena battle against Robotnik and Snively in a blatant attempt to make Eggman flesh and blood again because he was a robot. It's a whole thing. As for the robot itself, the design is pretty generic, but this Mecha Tails does fall in line with the other early Archie Mecha Sonic designs, so if you were a fan of that robot, you kind of get a continuation of this line of bots, which I guess is kind of neat. We'd also get another Mecha Tails from an alternate universe held up in a multiversal jail and first introduced in Counseling, and then from there you can see it here and there in the background, joining in on a riot and then inevitably inevitably getting caught. This all happens in the background of a much bigger, much crazier story, and I really gotta quit waffling on this. Sonic universe is wild. But we're not done, because there is yet another roboticized Tails that appeared when Sonic crossed over with Mega Man and the Fox was turned into Tails Man, which, while very simple and kind of baby-shaped in the torso, I do dig this design. They really downplayed all the animal aspects, and I like that the tails, like the tails on Tails, look like metal wings. It's a clever way to utilize robot versions of his propeller ass. As you can see from all these other designs, they didn't really go out of their way to do much more than make them awkward propellers or just bolted bits of metal, which ultimately would have made them useless anyway. I'm rambling. There's just a lot of Tails robots. There's way more than I expected, and we still have so many more to talk about. We also have 3 robots to mention from Sonic Boom. Like the rest of the core cast, there's a Tails bot for the multiplayer of Sonic Boom Ice and Fire. Is it Fire and Ice? I don't care. And a cyborg Tails who functions about the same as the rest of the other cyborgs during the Morristown set of episodes. And I said all I really needed to say about any of these robots when I covered it last year. Or was that 2 years ago? I can't even keep track anymore. But there is one other robot from Boom that stands out from the rest, and that is Hypnobot, a robot that's once again designed by Tails himself, and 3 for 3. Not a single one of these robots mentioned were made by Eggman. Interesting. So this robot was made because Knuckles got a compliment, then thought himself as an inventor, then Tails made this robot to shut him up, and they put it in a competition, and then there was a robot tournament, which Tails won, but then Eggman takes over the robot, but then the heroes get it back, and then a robot poodle jumps on it and it blows up. It's an episode of Sonic Boom. Nothing really makes sense. Things just happen. But more important than any of that, this is hands down the ugliest of the robots I've talked about so far. This really only has Tails in its design to mark it as something of a signature for the Fox. Outside of that, the robot really has nothing in common with its creator. As the name implies, it uses its giant antenna to take command of any machine with artificial intelligence, which is why Eggman wanted to take it over, and apparently it didn't blow up after a dog jumped on it. Instead, it went up to space and was discovered by the Morristown robots, where it becomes kind of a dick. Again, I covered this story when we covered the cyborg heroes, which, yeah, were created in this run of episodes, so we had 2 different Tails robots in vicinity of one another, and that's kind of cool. And honestly, this is where Hypnobot was the closest to being interesting. He had gained sentience and a nasty need to take over the planet and get revenge on his creator. And I gotta admit, I do appreciate his sass. This is almost the equivalent of Tails having his own version of Ultron. And while I don't dig the design, I do appreciate the concept. This sort of relationship between one of our heroes and a robot double could really only happen with Tails. He's the only one in Sonic's crew capable of building a robot. Now granted, this relationship is nothing deep. This is Sonic Boom after all, and while I really don't ever need to see this particular design again, the concept is certainly worth revisiting and expanding on. What if Tails was genuinely offended that Eggman never made a proper robot copy of the Fox? So Tails took matters into his own hands to make his own robot double, and through whatever contrived circumstance you want to throw together, the robot not only pushed back against the forces of Eggman, but also against its own creator and all of his friends. That might be a cool way to keep the spirit of 9 alive if they wrap up his story after Sonic Prime ends. Oh my god, that's right, there's a Chaos Tails coming out too. There's so many robots. I guess 9 almost counts as a Tails cyborg. I mean, not really. That said, I do really like the concept of that character. I know a lot of fans don't like his attitude. I don't care. I think he's pretty interesting. And that personality might be a great way to utilize a metal Tails in the future. But yeah, all of that said, you might have noticed not one of these robots, outside of what we talked about during Superstars, is named Metal Tails. But there was one robot that went by that name before we got Superstars. And it, of course, can be found in Ian Flynn's run of Archie Sonic. Here we have a Metal Tails as a part of the Metal series, and it comes and goes just as quickly as that Metal Amy I already talked about. And the design is fine. It's not exactly inspired. It's cool because Metal Sonic is cool. There's nothing really here that makes it stand out in terms of design. And the little tuft of metal fur bothers the hell out of me. It doesn't serve any purpose. I'm not going to go through that ramble again. Go watch the Amy video. I'm sorry, I'm just ultra picky when it comes to Metal series designs. The Archie one is totally fine, but it's exactly what you'd expect from a basic Metal Tails design. When it first showed up, I was mostly just happy that it was here. And I'm sure that was the case for Ian Flynn, as often as he mentioned it otherwise in a couple of jokes. But yeah, there you go. Kind of a cool robot, but it's here and then it's gone and that's it. And that, of course, finally leads us back to the latest and I would argue greatest, Metal Tails. Like I said, and like I say for all the Superstars robots, this bot isn't doing anything different from any other battle mech, but the design is inspired. And thanks to the Archie Metal Tails, putting these side by side, you can see some really clever choices. The most prominent and most obvious are the tails themselves. For the Archie version, they did their best to replicate the propeller properties of the fleshy fox, giving these blade-like appendages that, given a bit more screen time, they could have probably utilized them in interesting ways. But if you're going to make an advanced robot made to match and outclass the physical abilities of its opponent, giving this thing propellers does seem a little silly in hindsight, and this is why I love the Superstars robot so much. The Archie version is meant to copy Tails. The game version is meant to outclass Tails, which should always be the purpose of a Metal. It's Eggman's way of saying that he can create anything better than the natural world can provide. This thing doesn't have propellers. I mean, the other robot copies have jets. Why would you put something so rudimentary on a robot? No, instead, Metal Tails has twin turbine engines, and I cannot believe I have never thought of that for a design choice before. Not only does this just look fantastic, from the design alone, you can see the strengths of this robot, how it's meant to outclass its real-life counterpart, and how it stands out from the other Metals. Metal Sonic is made for speed, Metal Knuckles made for power, Amy! Alright, I've still got to figure that one out. And Metal Tails is made for air combat. He even has jets on his little booties. And look at this side profile here. Even the torso has a cone shape, like one single big boob. Or maybe the nose of a jet. That's probably more likely. And the face kind of gives me jet pilot helmet vibes, at least in this concept art. And the red gem here is probably making reference to the Tails doll. But if I wasn't aware of the doll's existence, I would say that this is a reference to a Mega Man X helmet. But maybe it's like a light on a plane or something like that. I don't know how you make planes. And I love how stocky this little dude is. Not only does that rep how young Tails is at this point in the series, I imagine this robot is just lighter in general, which is probably very important for maneuverability in the air. And the yellow color, which yes, I know the robot is yellow, which is fine with me because when you compare it to Tails, it's obvious that these are two distinct colors. And look, I got the spray cans right here, baby. I can color this robot like yellow, as it says on the can, or I could take this can that says orange, and would you look at that? Sure looks a lot like Tails, doesn't it? Although I do have to admit that Metal Tails just looks better when he's yellow. I don't think Sega or Sonic Team or anybody over there cares about this weird argument on whether or not Tails is yellow or orange. They clearly fluctuate between the two quite a bit, but maybe this is another have your cake and eat it too moment, because they do let the fox represent both colors in weird ways, and it's kind of cool that his robot rival is full on yellow. That's adorable. I didn't expect to like this robot so much, but seriously, there is so much genuine effort put into every detail, and I'm here for it. But if this robot is canon, and this takes place before Sonic Adventure in the classic era, I do have to admit, it did bring up a question or two about the timeline. Now, let me be clear, I'm not going to lose any sleep over this nonsense. I just want good Sonic games, and I'm fine with them cramming as many classic style games as they want, just as long as they're fun. I say go for it. Gameplay should always be the priority, and what I'm about to posit is mostly headcanon, and even then, I don't think this actually contradicts anything. This doesn't cause any actual genuine plot holes. It's just something I thought about, and something maybe other hardcore fans would want to consider. Maybe Sega themselves would want to consider. See, the Tails doll exists. Now, we could argue the canonicity of Sonic Sonic are one way or the other, but the Tails doll, in one way or another, is a part of the classic canon. And the very existence of that doll, as I said in its own video, does imply that Eggman doesn't see the Fox as a genuine threat. He's just some annoying kid that follows Sonic everywhere, and the Tails doll kind of represents how little Eggman cares. And even in the doll's description, it's clear that Eggman created the doll to burden and distract Sonic. It's got nothing to do with the real Tails. That's how little regard the Mad Doctor gives the Fox. But all of that changes once Sonic Adventure happens. This was the big turning point for a lot of the secondary cast, and in this case, Tails finally stepped out of the shadow of Sonic to become the hero he was always meant to be. Now, yes, he did go on his own adventures in the Game Gear games, but neither of those adventures ever had the Fox take on Sonic's greatest enemy. They never had him face one of his greatest fears, and it's only at the end of Tails' campaign does the Fox finally, canonically, take on Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik all by his little lonesome. And after the Fox gets his victory in Station Square, no matter how much smack talk that Eggman gives towards the cub, this is where the Doctor finally acknowledges the potential of Tails. And we only see that grow in the next game, then it flounders a bit with weird canon, but inevitably we lead back to Eggman respecting the intelligence and threat that is Tails the Fox. And the existence of Metal Tails in the classic era kind of flies in the face of all of that. This robot is clean, clever, and dynamic in its design. And I kind of have a hard time seeing Eggman put this much effort into a robot double for Tails this early on. I think this is where fans who argue against having so many robot clones are coming from. Sonic is a big deal, so it makes sense that Eggman would make a robot copy of the blue dude. But does everyone deserve a robo double? Well, yes they do, but I think it might make a little more sense for Eggman to make doll forms of Tails and Amy in the classic era, and only after acknowledging their growth into formidable opponents in the modern era would he bother to give them the metal treatment. After all, Metal Sonic is one of the very few robots he bothers bringing back. If you're gonna make a metal, it's gotta be a big deal. Then again, maybe there's more story they haven't told us yet in terms of these prototype battle bots. That's the impression I got while playing Superstars. And end of the day, it's just a fun little thought experiment. If I had the choice between more Sonic robots in a fun, maybe or maybe not canon form, or not having any robots at all because it contradicts the canon, I'm gonna pick the robots. They're sick as hell, and Metal Tails is sick as hell. And if you don't like it, you can go give yourself a swirly, you boring piece of white bread. I'm not saying take away Metal Tails. I want more. Give me more Metal Tails. I don't give a crap what kind of canon it destroys. I'm just saying, hey, nowadays, it looks like they're trying to take more care with the timeline of the overall series, and if that's being considered, well, if you're going to incorporate any new ideas into this canon, just keep the continuity in mind, keep the character intentions in mind. Yeah, it's a lot more work, but that kind of stuff can be fun to put together. I mean, look at my show. And it's a lot of fun for the hardcore fans. But I'm moving a little too far away from the core topic, which of course is Metal Tails, but that's really all I got to say. Just listed off a bunch of goofy robots, and I really hope there's more to talk about in the future. If you can't tell by now, I love Sonic robot doubles. And while I think we need a lot more Metal Tails, I gotta admit I was surprised, just like I was with Amy, finding as many robots as I did. Who knows, maybe I missed one here or there. Let me know in the comments if I did. But for now, that's going to do it. We gotta get to other robots and some other stupid topics for videos. So if you had fun here and it's your first time here, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more stupid content in the future, and go check out the playlist. We got a lot of videos on Sonic robots. And hey, to all the folks who have made it this far, thank you. To all the folks on Patreon who helped keep me alive, double thank you. And an extra special thank you to these fine folks here: Kyle Winter, Surus the Skeptic, Joseph, Duncan, Sonic 2 Blue is someone I'm super jealous of because deep down I secretly love. I'm not gonna keep lying for you, Joseph. I'm not gonna betray Green like that. I don't care. John, Josh Strider, Monroe Prower, Hatsworth, Tiny, Jericho, Ginger Bob, Jack of all spades, Tristan, Trap, Meekers, Dun Quote, Resident Fanboy, Miles the Prower, Singer J199, Sam Webster, Fishflop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Jonathan Dobbs, Chad, Super Super Hyper Mecha SP Mark II, Cecil the Gallade, the Dark Neon, Stefan, Placonica, 3 Monic, Ty Cyan, Graham J. Hall, Lenny X, Wayne is Boss, Lederick, someone who can make video games but not sure if allowed to say what it is, but anyway, when are you going to do a video on Grim Crisis? Jimmy Duke STR, the Lumberjack, Trash, Baphomet, Autumn from Twitter.com, Enerjack 5, Spades the Nocturne, Ken K of Warheads, Ven 101, Paxton Bisbee, Sindarin 7, Dagrons, Twilord, Spider-Man 2 is still a week away, I'm never updating my name, oh wait, never mind, Paisley, Eric Delgado, Sayonara, Robocop, Crimson Rose, Nyx the Kobold, Sonic PAJ, Moonicent, Roxas the Cat, I goofed that up, Roxas the Cat, Godzilla, Makuta of Salt, This Power is Like a Scam, Alexander Watson, Neil Gompa, Koden Kudo, The Leg's the most powerful ship in the two universes, Native Nerd 27, Kaido Prower, Swift Cannon, Spearman, Omega Man 21, Pen Adelaide, The Phantomist, Silver Stars, Daza S, the world's most unironic 8.5 tail stand. One more Sonic Robot, SP is currently undergoing an identity crisis, so we created Evil Clone SP, MT Mecha, Yasai, Gob, Charles the Green Dragon, Botan. Here to remind everyone that manatees are awesome. I'm sorry I rushed through that, but I did just also record the Metal Amy video, so that's where you guys got most of my reactions, and truth be told, you might or might not hear it. I'm still trying to recover from a cold, and my voice is straining really, really badly, and I have a tickle in my throat, so I'm going to go cough up a storm until I puke. But once again, guys, thank you so much. I don't want you to feel like I'm rushing through this because it's an inconvenience. My throat just tickles that bad. I appreciate every single one of you so much. But yeah, I can't hold back this cough much longer, so I'm going to get going. Toot toot, Sonic Warriors!